Hello. We have a very special show for you today. First, we are talking to one of the first African-American journalists at KDKA and in Pittsburgh to have her very own community affairs show. Many of you remember her, Yvonne Forston Allison. For 12 years, Pittsburgh watched her at a time when there were very few women and women of color on television. We'll walk down memory lane. And while we're at it, we're also going to talk to Lynne Hayes-Freeland, a longtime KDKA journalist and talk show host. She'll share stories about her time here and what she's been doing since she left. So pull up a chair and meet us at the corner. Intersection starts right now. Hello, I'm Lisa Smith, Director of Community Impact at KDKA Plus and the host of Intersections. It was 1968 when Yvonne Forston made the historic jump from educator to television news reporter and talk show host at KDKA TV. She was the first Black reporter here to have her own talk show. She had a 12-year career here, along with some major moments, celebrity encounters, and more. Today, she is still going strong with the launch of a new podcast, and she is here with us from her home in Philadelphia. Welcome to Intersections, Yvonne Forston Allison. So nice to see you.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you so much. What a pleasure to meet you.
Hey, it is our pleasure. So first of all, tell us a little bit about, you were a teacher in the Hill District, and you ended up working here at KDKA. How did that happen?
Well, it was just an incredible opportunity for me. I love teaching. My parents were so thrilled that I went to teach because that's what my college degree was in, elementary education. And I went to teach in the Hill District of Pittsburgh right after the riots. And while teaching, I met some people from KDKA, and they were very involved in some of the educational programs and what have you. And so at that time, right after the race riots, which did hit Pittsburgh, they were looking to do more with African Americans on air. So what they ended up doing was a community affairs show that ran weekly. It was called the Together Show. And they asked me if I would come and audition.
Wow.
I said, sure. And they said, you can continue teaching because we tape once a week and then we play back on Saturday. So you don't have to give up your teaching gig. And I went, wow, that works. What do I need to do? Well, come to the station. One of our celebrities, one of our people will interview you. And that will be the audition. Well, at that time, it was Marie Torrey. People in Pittsburgh remember that name. She was a big star. I was so nervous when I walked in and I saw her, and she put me right at ease. She said, just be yourself, be yourself. So she interviewed me. I didn't even realize they were taping. I heard somebody say, cut. She said, wow, you did a great job. And that was the beginning.
Wow. So what was the reaction? You had students who were hopefully watching you and their parents. And what was the reaction from people here in Pittsburgh when they saw you on TV?
Well, first of all, my students, I was so honored. They did a sit-in when they thought I was going to be leaving their classroom. And so that was unbelievable. But for a while, I was able to still teach, right? And then I was approached by the news director who said, I enjoy your interviews. I like the interview style that you have. Would you be interested in news? That's when I left full-time teaching and went into KDKA as a full-time reporter with the education beat. So it was like it was happening so fast. And I think students and parents, I think they were excited. And I also ended up interviewing some of my kids because they were so verbal about the riots and what happened in Pittsburgh. And so it was just a great time for everybody.
Yeah. So do you think that in a sense you kind of helped Pittsburgh kind of um, go through that period of time that was happening, you know, in 1968 after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. and the riots? Did you feel like you were kind of helping people through, helping people to process what was happening in the city?
I like to think that I did. I tried really hard to do that because the riots and the death of Dr. King were so overwhelming that they really, a lot of people were not only upset, but they were very, very concerned about how the city was going to recover. So a lot of the stories that I tried to do, for example, the Black Panthers were just getting organized. So I got in touch with them and said, I'd like to hear about what you all are doing. So I tried to bring those kinds of stories to the community so that we could have that conversation about where are we? Where are we headed?
Yeah. So how did the Yvonne Forston show get started?
See, Lisa, you're asking these questions, and and my everybody always says, "And Yvonne will talk and talk and talk." Well, it was exciting as well. I did the news reporting. I ended up leaving the education beat, and I became the consumer reporter, and I did some live shots on the new news, and also the 6 o'clock news at that time. And while I was doing that, Marie Torrey became my mentor, actually. She really was so gracious, and I had both of my kids when I worked at KDKA, and she had had two children. So she was so helpful on so many levels. And so when she would go on vacation, she asked me to sit in and do her show. And that's really how it kind of started, because she then moved on to a larger, bigger position in New York because she wanted to do some producing. And so her slot was open, and she actually recommended me because I was comfortable with her show, and I always enjoyed doing live. So that's how it started.
Yeah. So, you know, you're doing the show, and I know there's this picture of you and Bob Hope. Like, how many were you
Oh,
seeing meeting celebrities? And I mean, how did that kind of come about?
well, back then there was the supper club called the Holiday House out in Monroeville. And they brought in all of the big names, the big stars, and we were able to get them on the show because Marie had already set that pace. Because all of the stars who came any place near Pittsburgh did the Marie Torrey show. So then they did mine. So Bob Hope was one of those stars. And I must tell you, Lisa, that was an interview I'll never forget. I laughed so hard. This man was so funny. I couldn't get a question out. I mean, it was so incredible. Then the coup de grace was when he gave me a golf lesson. And he said, "Now, Yvonne," and while he's doing this, he's chattering and throwing in all these one-liners. So he said, "Okay, now I gave you your first lesson. I showed you how to hold the club. I want you to show me how you would hold the club." I'm still doubled over laughing, but I take the club and I said, "Is this right?" He said, "Yvonne, do me a favor. Don't ever play the game of golf." I never have.
Wow.
But he was amazing. One of the things I also liked about him, he loved the crew. When he
Yes.
came in for the show, because the show was live, when he came in for the show, he went around and shook every crew member's hand and talked to them. And that always meant a lot to me because I always felt my crew was so special and always had my back. But he was terrific with them.
Well,
Wonderful.
Yvonne, these are some wonderful stories, and we're going to continue, so don't go away. We have so much more with Yvonne Forston Allison. Also, Lynne Hayes-Freeland will be joining us as well. You're watching Intersections. You're watching a special edition of Intersections, where we are checking in on some familiar faces from KDKA TV's past. We've been talking with Yvonne Forston Allison. She is staying with us for the entire show, and we're going to have another guest joining us in just a few minutes. Yvonne, welcome back. And so,
Thank you.
Yes.
And by the way, do you know that Mr. Hope died at age 100?
Wow.
I didn't realize that till just recently. I thought I'd share that.
Yeah. Well, you were really someone who was paving the way for a lot of women in this business. What was it like? What were the challenges like for you as a woman in television?
Well, there were several, and the thing that I always recognized when working at KDKA, I always felt good about being at the station. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I enjoyed being there, and even though there was just myself, Marie Torrey, and at that time she was called a secretary to the news director, that was it. But I didn't feel discriminated against. I had to prove myself. I had to break stories, which I did, because I didn't have a journalistic background. But I didn't feel the pressure, even though at one point it was said to me, your voice is a little high, but we'll work with that. And I thought to myself, okay. So there were times, there were moments, but you had to continue to navigate them. And I tried not ever to lose my focus. I had a life before television and I had a life after television. And so I went along with the various things. For example, there was a very big meeting, and back then KDKA was owned and operated by Westinghouse Broadcasting. So the big honchos from New York would come in, and they would always set up a meeting at the Duquesne Club. Now, back then, women were not permitted, minorities and women were not permitted to go into the front door. They couldn't enter the club through the front door. Marie Torrey, Yvonne Forston Allison, and two of our producers had to go in through the kitchen. I thought I was mad. I have never seen Marie as red in the face as she was, but we pursued the situation all together. And we became closer knit because we all had to go through that. And the other two producers were producers that I didn't even know. I mean, I didn't have any interaction with them, but boy, we supported each other that day. So there were moments like that.
Well, we definitely appreciate that, and just love hearing from you. And we want to actually bring in another guest. Lynne Hayes-Freeland also had a very long career here at KDKA TV, and she was here for more than 40 years, from field producer for Evening Magazine to producer and host of Vibrations, and of course the Lynne Hayes-Freeland Show. Lynne has been a major asset in the community, a voice for KDKA TV. Lynne, welcome to Intersections.
Well, thank you. These are familiar. This is familiar territory for me, but I'm glad to be here in this capacity.
Yes, I know. It looks, you probably don't remember this back here at all, right?
No.
So obviously you reported here and you were able to work on Vibrations. Tell me a little bit about, kind of how you were able to move from reporter into TV host.
You know what? It's kind of interesting because I think mine was just the opposite of the story that Yvonne's telling, because I started hosting the show and then I moved into the newsroom. Now, I guess there are some similarities there. But I have been producing Vibrations for years. I produced the show for Bev Smith. Bev Smith left, and a woman, Dorothy Tucker, who's now in Chicago, took over the show. I think I actually even helped with Bev's predecessor, Dave Berkeley. But when Dorothy left, the general manager kind of came to me and said, "Hey, who knows the show better than you? Why don't you host it?" But I had probably been at KDKA 15, 16 years maybe as a producer before I ever even went in front of the cameras. So it was kind of an odd transition. Being on camera was never really my goal, but I think it turned into my comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, listen, we are going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to both Yvonne Forston Allison, Lynne Hayes-Freeland. You're watching Intersections. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation today with Yvonne Forston Allison and Lynne Hayes-Freeland. And Lynne and Yvonne, tell me a little bit about, what it has been for you to just withstand the test of time, staying in this business and having longevity. Lynne, let's start with you. What's it been like for you?
You know what? I think a lot of it comes down to being a part of the community. And I think once you are a part of the community, people come to you, stories come to you. And, as they say, to whom much is given, much is required. So not only do you have to be a part of the community, you have to give back to the community. And what I found over the years is I developed lifelong friends through my work at KDKA, both in-house and out in the community.
Yeah. Yvonne, how about for you? Longevity.
Well, I think, number one, may I say that I am so happy to see Lynne.
I know.
I have
You know
such
what?
fun.
You guys never. You were kind of here at the same time, but not kind of here.
Well, no, but we were there just long enough to really kind of hook up, right, Lynne? I mean, she was amazing. I love Bev Smith. I was just happy to hear what she just said about Bev. And Lynne now visits with my cousins, right? So it's all family, all right?
All family.
That's awesome.
I think your question's a good one because I think what Lynne said is important as well. But when the saddest day for me was when my show went off the air, even though it was replaced by Patrice King Brown, who I have a great rapport with, a great relationship. That says a lot about us Black women who started early on, right? Had nothing to do with her replacing me. It had to do with I no longer was doing a show, right? So it was a sad time for me. And so my decision was then to go and kind of leave the business temporarily. So that's when I went to work for Dick Thornburg. But I stayed when he was governor. But I stayed in the whole communications arena, which was always very important because you develop, and I'm sure Lynne can attest to this, you develop a skill set that you can then transfer to different areas, to other areas of the business.
Yeah.
And at first you don't really understand that you've developed this wonderful skill set until you actually find an opportunity to put it in play. So that's kind of a long way around answering what you asked, because I think I like to encourage young women to really think about their skill set and what they have to offer and how it can be applied in different areas, and not to be nervous about it. Just understand that it might be something brand new, but what can you do with what you've gained in your work in the media? How can you apply it to wherever you are in your life and take advantage of those opportunities? Yeah. So after KDKA, I kept taking advantage of opportunities that would come my way. And I migrated from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia.
That's awesome. We only have time for really one more question, but I'm kind of wondering, what was your proudest moment while on the air, having your own show? both of you. Lynne, you want to go first? Your proudest moment, your biggest get in terms of an interview, maybe.
You know, my biggest get, that's an easy one for me, was Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
When
Oh,
he came to the United States, he was touring. It was one of his first interviews in the United States, not long after he had been released from prison. So as a personality, that a name, that was probably the biggest name that I can think of. But I just want to point out that a lot of times the shows that didn't feature big names were the ones that made the most difference. I mean, I remember we did a show once, I don't even remember when it was, called Is Skin Color Still an Issue in the Black Community? It became such a controversial show, and we had a studio audience because it was something people were talking about.
Wow, wow. How about for you, Yvonne?
how do you follow Nelson Mandela? I mean, that's difficult. But
That's pretty
I'm going to
good.
give it a shot. My proudest moment and my biggest moment was when I was at the remote location when we were doing the Children's Hospital telethon. And I was at Children's Hospital and I was talking to the kids. And at that time, my son, Andy, was hospitalized on the floor right below where I was talking to the kids.
Wow.
That was my biggest moment. And I'll never forget how much it meant to me to be able to be raising money for that incredible hospital that provided so many things for the children. I'll never forget that night. That was a big night for me. And I didn't even realize I was going to be on remote. I mean, you know, you get assigned, you don't know whether you're going to be in studio or whether you're, but I was on remote, and it was really special.
Wow. Well, ladies, I wish we had more time. We need more time because you have so much wealth of knowledge and so much to share. I thank you both so much for being with us. I do want to say that, Yvonne, you have a brand new podcast that is out right now. We're showing it on our screen right now. It's Yvonne Forston Allison Buzzsprout.com. I know you have 2 shows up already, more to come. Thank you both so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And I'll have my last word when we come back. Inspiration. It's easy to see how women like Yvonne Forston Allison and Lynne Hayes-Freeland are inspiring to those who follow in their footsteps. They've set a standard by doing their work with integrity and authenticity. What's great is they are still at it, even at 80 years old for Yvonne Forston Allison. It's a testament to never stop using your voice to inspire others. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Intersections.